Hello everyone, and welcome to our latest project video. Today, I'll be showcasing our aged blue blanket box project, taking you through every step we took, from stenciling with chalk paste to creating an aged effect with wax. To get this project started, SollyJo first cleaned the blanket box with sugar soap. This is a very important first step, as she was upcycling an old piece of furniture that had some dust and dirt on the surface, which would cause imperfections later on if we didn't clean it. She then applied a base coat of Nuit Parisienne by Magic Paint to all sides of the blanket box except the top panel, because she had different plans for that later, and the back panel, as it would not be visible where she planned to use the blanket box. Once she was satisfied with this base coat, she applied a layer of Posh Chalk crackling gel to each of the three sides, using a Posh Chalk small smooth and blend brush to ensure an equal distribution of the gel. The crackling gel coat was then allowed to dry naturally, before SollyJo applied a combination of sunset blue and sugar paper by Magic Paint on each of those three sides. She used the Posh Chalk Moldings brush to apply the darker coloured sunset blue around the edges of each panel, before using a Posh Chalk small smooth and blend brush to apply the lighter coloured sugar paper in the centre and blend the colours together. SollyJo purposefully didn't blend the colours perfectly in order to help create that aged effect that she wanted. As you can see, she even applied some more of the sunset blue in random places on the surface to contribute to this effect. The blended coats of paint were then force dried with a heat gun. As they were layered on top of our crackling gel coat, cracks formed across the surface. The dark base coat we had started by applying really emphasised these cracks by contrasting against the blended shades of blue. The next step for this project was stenciling. SollyJo had chosen to use the Posh Chalk Evergreen Premium Stencil and Posh Chalk Chalk Paste. The Evergreen stencil was adhered to the front-facing panel of the blanket box on the far left side, and then some chalk paste was decanted into a small convenient pot. To match the style of the rest of the project so far, the chalk paste was then coloured with a combination of the Posh Chalk Arctic White and Royal Indigo colour kits. After stirring this mixture thoroughly, it created a perfect light, almost greyish blue. SollyJo then used the Posh Chalk Premium Finishing Trowel to apply the coloured chalk paste on top of the stencil. The finishing trowels make it very easy and convenient to equally distribute your chosen medium across the surface of the stencil without leaving even any brush marks. As we pull off the stencil, you can really see how this design looks perfectly at home on our project, but our choice of colour really made it stand out. Due to our stencils being fully repeatable, the stenciled on chalk paste was force dried, and SollyJo was able to easily fill the rest of the blanket box's front panel with this design and her coloured chalk paste. During this stenciling, SollyJo had noticed a couple spots where bleeding had occurred, so she used a small paintbrush to touch up or fix these imperfections. She also decided to create some more visual depth on the project by applying a small amount of sugar paper on specific parts of the design. The contrast between the coloured chalk paste and this slightly darker shade of blue perfectly created a shading effect. The stencil was then also applied to the left and right sides of the blanket box before continuing. Now, it was time to attach WoodUbend Mouldings to our project. SollyJo didn't like the love heart-shaped hole in the top left area of the front panel, so she had decided to use the WUB 6013 moulding to cover them up. First, to avoid accidentally painting on top of the stenciling she had just done, the moulding was painted sunset blue using a Posh Chalk Moldings brush. Once the moulding was fully covered, it was force dried with a heat gun, which simultaneously heated it up until it was malleable enough for application. The entire footprint of the moulding was then covered with wood glue before it was pressed down onto the surface over top of those heart-shaped holes. This process was then repeated with the other WUB 6013 moulding, before SollyJo attached it on the opposite side of the front panel, maintaining some symmetry on the project. Now both the mouldings were attached, SollyJo wanted to do some detailing on the piece. She began by decanting some of the Posh Chalk bronze alloy pigment onto an old WoodUbend board, then mixed in Posh Chalk pigment infuser until she arrived at the consistency she desired, stirring the mixture as she went with a small paintbrush. This mixture was then dry brushed over top of the freshly adhered mouldings and in the groove at the bottom of the front panel. SollyJo then moved on to applying wax to her piece of furniture. After she started applying the clear Posh Chalk patina extending wax to the piece, she realised she could instead use this step to contribute to that aged effect she wanted to create. She then decanted some of the extending wax into a small tub and stirred a little bit of the Posh Chalk Royal Indigo colour kick into the wax. Once thoroughly stirred, this created a blue wax that was perfectly in keeping with the rest of the project's design. This blue wax was then applied across the entire surface of the front panel, with an emphasis around the edges of the mouldings and where the legs connected to the main bit of the blanket box. This blue wax was then applied to the left and right side of the piece as well. SollyJo then used a wet wipe to remove some of the excess blue wax, especially focusing on the centre of each panel to create a subtle shading effect, as well as contribute to that aged look that she'd been working towards. She then also used high grit sanding pads on the legs to really emphasise this aged look by allowing some of the layers of colour beneath the blue paint to show through, especially on the legs' corners. Moving into the final stages of this project, SollyJo wanted to create a faux marble tabletop using Posh Chalk Athenian Plaster. First, to ensure a professional looking finish once the piece was completed, she applied a coat of sunset blue with a Posh Chalk Mouldings brush to the back panel. Next, she needed to apply a base coat of paint to the top panel for her Athenian Plaster to sit on top of. She had selected Pepper Blue by Magic Paint to do this with. Once she was satisfied with her base coat and had force dried it, she decanted some of the Athenian Plaster into two different pots so that they could be coloured. The Posh Chalk Arctic White colour kick was mixed into one of the pots, and the Posh Chalk Royal Indigo colour kick was mixed into the other. SollyJo then used a sea sponge to apply her coloured Athenian plaster. First, the Arctic White mixture. Dabbing the mixture onto the surface with a sea sponge, like you can see here, creates a raised texture that is unique due to the nature of the holes in the sea sponge. Once the entire surface was covered with the Arctic White coloured Athenian plaster, SollyJo did the same with the Royal Indigo coloured Athenian plaster, until the surface was covered with both mixtures. The raised texture created by this application method then allowed SollyJo to flatten the mixtures using a Posh Chalk Premium Finishing Trowel. She did this diagonally across the top panel, maintaining the same direction as she flattened the entire surface. As you can see, even though it is not fully dried yet, this creates a marble-like effect. Due to the Athenian plaster being self-polishing, we were then able to burnish the surface until we had a glossy, mirror-like finish. This was done by simply sanding the tabletop with a belt sander using progressively higher grits of sandpaper. So, here is the result. We think the techniques combined on this project synergised perfectly to create a unique and interesting piece that can be used around the house anywhere. Please let us know in the comments below what you thought of this piece, and if we inspired you to start your own project, let us know. We would love to see it. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed, please leave a like, it really helps us out. And if you want to see a new project video every single week, subscribe to the channel. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time.